So hello any employees of Living Waters Publications and or personal assistants to Ray Comfort.
We remember you, and remember that time you did a false DMCA on our Audacity review.
This is going to be similar in that there's no copyrighted footage of any kind. And let me remind you that false DMCAs are seen in the eyes of the law as essentially perjury, and if you do it again, you're going to get served. So you can stick around and watch the review if you want, maybe listen to our opinions, maybe absorb some new information, but since there's nothing here to censor, I doubt you're going to do that. But if you do false DMCA us, this video is going to appear in court, and this portion will be Exhibit A. So sorry for this message, folks, but we had to do it. So enjoy the theme song.
Hugo and Jake, the Bible is jaded, and most overtaken, so get educated with Hugo and Jake. Pull up you and stop what you're doing, it's Bible reloaded time. They call it debated, the theorists will hate it, I'm talking to taken, but it's Hugo and Jake. So on with the show then, it's not candy coated, it's the Bible reloaded, with Hugo and Jake, with Hugo and Jake.
Hello everyone, I'm Hugo.
And I'm Jake.
And this is the Bible Reloaded.
With our review of Evolution v. God.
Yeah, this is Ray Comfort's movie that came out a few years ago, and we didn't actually plan on doing this because some other people have done it. For instance, Jacqueline Glenn did a very good breakdown of it that's about 15 minutes long. You want to check that out? You can look at it right here. But what happened, Jake, that spurred this review?
Well, our review of Audacity, his anti-gay marriage film, got taken down by Living Waters and the people that work within that, probably his personal assistant, or maybe Ray himself, but I doubt it.
No, it didn't seem like he knew anything about it.
Yeah, so they filed a false DMCA, and it got taken down and then put back up after a couple hours. We had like this short little battle. False DMCAs are illegal.
Yeah.
So we decided to do another Ray Comfort movie for two reasons. Number one, people have been asking for us to do this a lot. And number two,
fuck him. I don't know what to say other than that. And again, this review, as with the Audacity review, will not be using any footage from the film. I do apologize. I very much wish we could to better illustrate what's going on in the film at the time. But of course, Ray will not allow that, so we can't. Instead, there'll be, images and stuff like last time. But don't worry, next time we do a movie review with someone other than Ray Comfort, which will be next time. This is the last we'll hear of Ray for a while. Everything will be back to normal. But we did feel, since it's still pretty close to when it happened, we feel the need to talk about Ray just a little bit more. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about Evolution versus God.
it opens up with a Richard Dawkins quote, of course, because that's kind of the thing. They're like, look at the dumb thing the scientist said. And he says, faith is a great cop-out, the great excuse to evade the need to think and evaluate evidence.
You might think it strange that Ray Comfort would begin his documentary as a proponent of intelligent design, talking bad against faith, but this is the thing that Ray Comfort's trying to do in this movie. It's a switcheroo. Yeah. He's trying to position the evolution side of the debate as if it's the unreasonable one that requires faith, whereas his intelligent design camp, there's an abundance of evidence, and that is why he is presenting it as such, to try and make it look like Richard Dawkins is talking against his own position, even though, of course, he is not.
It's exactly the same thing he did in Audacity, where he took the entire love is love slogan that the gay marriage and gay activists use and turned it on its head and is like, well, no, if you love someone, you'll tell them that they're going to hell because they're gay.
Yeah.
It's the same exact tactic. All he's doing is moving words around a little bit to make it sound like he is on the correct side, which I get. That's kind of how you do things when you make an argument.
If you don't have any good points.
Yeah.
This movie, unlike Audacity, does not have a coherent narrative. There is no main character, there is no story. This is along the lines of Ray Comfort's other materials in which he interviews people and cuts them together sort of documentary style.
Yeah. And I will give Ray credit, he is very good at this. He's extremely good at being man on the street, talking to strangers, and making them look stupid.
He's talking to a university professor, presumably, and she says, atheism assumes you can disprove the existence of God. Agnostic is the more correct term. This, I think, we need to nip in the bud early in the review, because Ray's definition of atheism is quite a bit different than this person's definition and the general public's definition usually. So I'd like to talk about what we consider to be atheism, or agnosticism, whatever.
I think what Ray's doing is he's taking a hard 7 on the Dawkins scale in
Yeah.
atheism and saying it's a knowledge claim, when most people who identify as an atheist are just like, well, there's not really a better word to call me. Agnostic is kind of like the brand of atheist I am.
He's positing that essentially atheists are wrong because they're trying to say that they know for certain God does not exist, when of course the vast majority of people would never say that. Again, this is part of his tactic to try and switch things around and make it seem like he's the reasonable one and atheists are making outlandish assumptions. However, as most atheists would agree, I think, there's a limit to anyone's knowledge, and as far as we believe, there is no God. I don't believe there's a God,
Right.
but that's because there isn't sufficient evidence for it.
Yeah. And you can practice Gnostic atheism. A lot
Sure.
of people do. I mean, I think we do, but I would never say for 100% that there's nothing that I don't know.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of where we draw the line. Like, I am Gnostic atheist in regards to, like, the Christian God,
Sure.
but, not any sort of thing that we haven't discovered yet, I guess, if that makes sense.
So he asks them all a question. This is the beginning question of it. And do you think evolution is a belief?
What a loaded question.
This is a thing that Ray does too, playing with definitions of words, and people like him often do this sort of thing. When talking about belief, everyone has beliefs, and I think the issue is that even as atheists and proponents of evolution, we throw the word belief around, and the word truth around, and the word fact around in a lot of different ways, and it kind of muddies the argument. So let me establish at least where I'm coming from on this. Everyone has beliefs. Everything that you hold to be true, I think, is a belief. If you think evolution is a fact, it's still a belief, even if you have evidence for it. And I do believe, as far as you can know something, evolution is something that I know.
Yeah, I would say so too. But belief has this connotation of unfoundedness or
Right.
sort of Hail Mary. There's not really a reason, I think, about it. And that's the way, when it comes out of Ray Comfort's mouth, that's the way he's framing it, because his belief is that God exists and he believes it, and that's all the proof he needs. But we don't hold that in the same regard. Like, we don't hold belief in itself being proof.
Belief is not a virtue to us, whereas to him it is. He's trying to bring all beliefs, regardless of how you came to them, on the same level, because once he gets it down to that level, he can essentially say that our positions are the same, and then he'll continue to beat yours down until he makes you think that his looks better, because he cannot raise his opinion to the point of sounding reasonable. He has to beat other opinions down to sounding less reasonable than his own.
And then he goes on, after he establishes that, yes, evolution is a belief, he asks the students, again, are you a strong believer? Again, reaffirming his point that belief takes some sort of variation in whether or not, like, if it's held higher in your mind, it's somehow more valid.
Sure.
They'll try to interject, and they'll be like, well, yeah, but there's facts involved, and there's books and stuff. But he always just kind of, yeah, but are you a strong believer? He's treating it so much like a religion. And these kind of arguments don't make sense to me. Really, if you sat down and think about it, like, are you saying that belief or faith is in somehow inferior in some way to other forms of knowledge, making your position equally flimsy?
Yeah, the issue with Ray Comfort talking about beliefs like this is that he'll take down the idea of belief in anything, although in this case it's certainly evolution, and then ignore the fact that it also would apply to his belief in the Bible. But then he will say, but the Bible tells me something, and he'll never come back to the fact that still, at some point, you're using your own judgment system that you deem unworthy for anything else to try and say that the Bible is correct, and then everything needs to come back to that. So then we get another quote. This quote is from Science Daily, and it says, "The scientific method is based on the collection of data through observation and experimentation," which is fair. I mean, I think it's a little more complicated than that, but as a broad
the gist.
overall idea, that's basically what the scientific method is. Ray, however, then takes this definition to mean that he can ask any jackass on the street for proof of something, and if they themselves cannot obtain that proof instantaneously, it means that whatever they have failed to present evidence for must be false. So he continually asks people on the street, what is the evidence for evolution? Can you show it to me right now in this very instance? Well, if you can't observe it, then it must not be true.
And he'll go on through, and people obviously say the right answer. Well, yeah, you can see it in observable change over time, often over many millennia, sometimes millions of years, depending on the species. And he'll get scientists and students of biology telling him these things, and then a guy also who is a physicist who, I mean, yes, physicists are educated, but I mean, this is a biology question.
I'd also like to point out, this is important. These people are biology majors and physics majors. Okay, I don't know if you've ever been to college, Ray. I genuinely don't. I'm not being patronizing. I don't know. But people change their major all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Studying a subject does not make you an expert in one. These people could be freshman-level undergraduates in biology who've taken 2 biology classes. Of course they don't know what they're talking about.
Right, but the way he makes it sound like he's winning the argument is he will intersperse the scenes with the one lady scientist whose name I'm forgetting, and also P.Z. Myers, who are both scientists. And they'll all give him the same answer, like it's millions of years and you have to take it over time. And he's like, well, you weren't there a million years ago. You can't know things. You can't see it. It's not observable. You didn't observe it. It's like you can observe the records of those things quite clearly.
Yeah, that's the problem, is that his definition of observable is different than science's definition of observable. Observable does not mean that you directly are looking at a thing when it happens.
It's not like you gotta see it through glass.
It means that you can track and record the evidence that that thing happened. It'd be great if you could look at something, and in many things in science you can directly observe something happening, but a lot of the times you can't. And that's why you look for evidence, and that's what science is for. For when we can't have an immediate understanding of something, it's a tool to try and backtrack and understand why phenomena happens, or why things are the way they are. And Ray has taken this and said, no, you have to see something directly, which is interesting when it comes back to his beliefs on the Bible, because again, he says, the only person who was there was someone who wrote the Bible, but I would say to Ray, how do you know the person who wrote the Bible was there? How do you know that it was even...
Because he said they were.
I know.
Obviously. So he goes on, and what's the next step here? What's the next step? You say you can't see something and observe it, and then, so he asks for an example. Okay, well, what can I see today that you can do? And they give really good examples, like there's some plants, there's some, obviously there's some insects and stuff that reproduces quickly, like Victoria cichlids, that have changed species in their fish.
Yeah.
But he does the thing that you knew he was going to do, and he brings kinds into it. And he's saying, basically, well, you've never seen a dog turn into a cat, or you've never seen a fish turn into a bird, or etc. And so the flower's still the flower. And they're like, well, yeah, obviously. And P.Z. Myers is like, of course it's still a fucking flower. Why wouldn't it be?
The thing about kinds is, kinds isn't a thing,
At
Ray.
all.
He's been told this before, too.
Yeah, I know.
I know for a fact Ray's been told this. Kinds is not a definition that is used anywhere in actual science. And when you're trying to bring kinds into it, of course they can't bring you evidence of something that isn't even a tool used in science, because definitions are tools. So when you're asking for a change in kinds, it's like you're bringing someone a puzzle piece from a separate puzzle that they're working on and trying to cram it into it. It doesn't work. You're working with different systems that aren't compatible. Worse than that, you don't even really have a puzzle piece. You're Ray Comfort with a banana, smashing it over the puzzle and saying, where is the change?
But if he really wanted that information, if he's genuinely asking, when does a dog and a cat meet down the evolutionary line, there is an answer to that, because that animal exists.
The other issue with kinds is that in the Bible, if you've ever read the Bible, and we have because we do a Bible study,
Obviously.
every time kinds is mentioned in the Bible, it's incredibly vague. Never do they sit down and say, this is what a kind is.
No.
And in that way, Ray Comfort likes this word because he can use it to mean whatever he wants. Sometimes it means species that can interbreed with one another, which is the general term I've heard, and it's the one I accept for kinds. It's species that can interbreed. Right? So
well, other times they look the same.
Yeah, sometimes
but
it's
some
like
dogs,
cats.
But a pug doesn't look anything like a fucking German Shepherd.
I know.
And so, but just because you call it a dog, because they were descended from the same, gray wolf, basically, that doesn't, they can't interbreed. Well, I don't know if they can interbreed, maybe they can. But, some dogs and some cat breeds can't interbreed, but they're still cats and dogs based upon how we classify them in the canine or the feline set.
To further complicate matters, kinds also doesn't apply to the real world because there's something called ring species. And if you don't know what ring species are, there can be a species that lives in a certain geographical area, and then part of that species gets separated, maybe by some sort of natural disaster or some geographical feature like a mountain range.
Or humans taking them to the different location.
Right. Now, over time, these two groups of the same species might start to change and adapt to their different environments. And as it goes on, it looks like a little circle like this. You have little things going off to the sides, and then they go up here, and now they've adapted to the point where they're almost two different species. Now, these two down here could mate, and all those up the chain could mate with the one adjacent to them, but these two up here, they can't mate. So where do the kinds exist here, Ray? Because kinds doesn't apply cleanly here because it doesn't necessarily reflect the reality with which we are observing. And that's the problem with definitions in anything, is that whether it be kinds or species, we're just using words to try and explain features around us. And even species has issues as a definition. It's called the species problem. Wikipedia that shit.
Also, in one last little nitpick on the kinds, is in context of Genesis, when it says blankety blank along with its kind, all that's really saying is the same mateable species, male and female, are together.
Yeah.
It's not saying like, well, lions and tigers
No.
and leopards and panthers and pumas. It's saying lions, then tigers, and those are both separate kinds.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even in the context of Genesis, you can't just make it elastic however you want it.
So Ray continues to ask questions, and one person in particular brings up, he went to the Smithsonian. If you've never been there, it's the big museum, or not just museum, set of museums in Washington, D.C., and he was talking about the different exhibits there, and Ray said, well, those are just dummies, those are just stuffed things, they're not really there. Ray, they're all based on real things. They're based on fossils that have actually been excavated. They're based on things that we've actually found in the DNA.
Doesn't he support the Creation Museum?
I know, and the Creation Museum is, like, completely made up. They don't have anything real there,
Right.
so I don't know how we can try and justify shitting on the Smithsonian, which is probably the best museums in the country.
Yeah, no shit.
Ray's talking to P.Z. Myers, and P.Z. Myers, it's interesting to me, got pretty fucked in this movie. He'll hold on
He got mad about this.
I know. He'll hold on the college students for a really long time, the ones who don't know what they're talking about, and their cuts are very long, and he lets them say stupid shit, because, a lot of these kids don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But P.Z. Myers only gets very brief. I'm telling you, time the amount of screen time he has, it's incredibly short. And there's no better example of this when he's talking to P.Z. Myers, and he says... P.Z. Myers gives him an example of some sort of bacterium study that was done, and it showed that this bacteria changed over time. So Ray says, so essentially your evidence for evolution is bacteria becoming another kind of bacteria, which Ray at this point has decided doesn't count for some reason. And P.Z. Myers says, no, I'm saying that it's bacteria obtaining new metabolic capabilities, and then it looks like he's about to continue talking. Hard cut. Ray is the fucking worst when it comes to censoring people and editing people.
We have experienced that firsthand, obviously.
I can't believe that people watch this shit and take it seriously and can think that he's giving an unbiased view. And I'm not necessarily saying anything's really, truly unbiased.
Of course
Everything's going to have a bias.
This tips the scales far past what's acceptable. We have a little bit of issue with how Bill Maher ran Relativism, for example.
Sure.
He obviously was taking the time to make sure that his jokes were set up correctly, and sometimes he'd say a zinger and then cut to that person being dumbfounded as if that's an actual response someone would have.
Yeah.
But he's not taking them out of context, it doesn't seem, for the most part. I'm sure he does it a couple times. But Ray almost exclusively does, and then also hard cuts away when someone's going to go on and further explain their position and make it more complex than I think Ray's arguments can handle.
Sure.
So, and he does this all the time, and this is really, really, really great evidence towards it.
So then Ray continues, a lot of this is him asking for more evidence, and then when they give some sort of evidence, he says they've given evidence for something speciating, or changing from one species to another, not kinds, which is interesting, because before, I know for a fact Ray has used the definition of kinds, that one thing that can breed with another, and that's exactly what species is. And then he goes on to say that species has 14 different definitions. This is something I've heard from him several times. I've looked for this so many places. I absolutely cannot find varying definitions of species.
Unless he's counting just how they say the sentence differently?
I don't know. I have no idea what he's doing, because species means, generally speaking, two animals that can breed with one another. Okay? And again, I talked about it earlier, but the species problem is something that says that sometimes that line's gray. When you're talking about species, it's like looking at a gradient. There are some parts on one side that are white and sometimes on one side that are black, and it's hard to draw a line to decide exactly when one becomes the other. There's a gray area, and that's what it is. Species is a way of trying to decide that, and there's a little bit of leeway there, but the definition of species doesn't really change.
And that's exactly why we have kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and then species, because we need all those extra steps to make our way up to it, to make sure that we have classified these to the best that we can, not including the subclasses within those.
Yeah, and even then, There's going to be stuff that's gray, and
course.
some people would classify one way and some would classify another.
Because
but that's the point. We're trying to put constraints on nature which doesn't have these artificial boundaries that we're trying to put to it. So then they bring up Darwin's finches, and if you don't know, Darwin, when he went to the Galapagos, one of the things he observed when writing about evolution was the finches there on the different islands and how they probably derived from the same species that then spread out and adapted to the different islands.
Right. Ray shot that down immediately, and it's like, no, that's adaptation.
Yeah. The thing is, though, Ray, let's do a little thought experiment.
Sure.
Okay, so let's imagine these finches, they're on the different islands.
Of course.
And they've adapted over, who knows, maybe thousands of years, maybe even hundreds of years, because sometimes extreme pressures can give way to extreme change
Also, they have
over short periods.
pretty quick reproductive cycles.
Sure. You say that this is just adaptation, and they've already changed. Here's some pictures of the different finches. So some have bigger beaks, some have smaller beaks, depending on their food needs. Okay, now let's assume the environments continue to change, and they adapt to those as well. Now let's assume this keeps happening for 1,000 years, 2,000, 10,000, 100,000, maybe 1,000,000 years. These small changes over time all accumulate, and at that point, I guarantee what the animal you would be looking at looks nothing like the finch that you knew. The evidence that you're looking for is right there. You're just looking at it on a human scale, which is not how you can look at evolution. We're extrapolating from the fact that these things change a little bit over time, and that we can see, to the fact that they change a lot, and these all accumulate over periods of time. That, in conjunction with what we can see in the fossil record, which seems to indicate that this is correct, along with DNA evidence that shows that everything on the planet, as far as we can tell, are related to different extents. Evolution is fucking true, Ray. It's evolution. That's what it is. So now Ray just cuts together footage of people unable to answer his questions, because if random college students can't answer his questions, no one can! But also I like he does, in this section, re-put the things that say, like, biology major, whatever. Again,
I love
Ray,
the guy that's physicist.
Yeah, just physicist. He's not a physicist, he's a fucking physics student, you ass.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course these people have no idea what they're talking about. In fairness, neither do I. I can make arguments better than he can, though. Or make arguments better than they can.
Oh, sure. I think we've dealt with it more than that, and also we're not being bombarded by Ray.
I know. I feel like half those kids were like, I've taken three sessions of biology and 101. I bet I can take this.
They all looked in their early 20s. None of them looked like they had gone through the courses.
No.
And then Ray does this thing where he basically pits you against a deity, and he says, hey, can you make a rose out of nothing?
Okay, so he says that if you can't make a rose out of nothing, then it must be intelligently designed. It's hard to talk about this because this argument is so asinine, it's hard to know where to begin. But this argument assumes a couple of things. Firstly, it assumes that humans are some sort of apex litmus test for what is and is not possible.
That's ridiculous. We can't even, not choke on pretzels.
I know, as if a human can't do something, then it's impossible for anything else to do it. That's fucking ridiculous, Ray. You're out of your mind. Secondly, it assumes that somehow some sort of vague idea of intelligence allows you control over nature, as if somehow something being intelligent, something designing something, then allows you to control nature and create things, which of course is not true as far as we know.
What we can do, though, is genetically engineer roses to be blue or something.
But here's the thing. If you said that to Ray, I know exactly what he would say.
He would say, well, you already had the rose and you moved on.
And not only that, but God gave you the ability to do that.
Sure,
he gave you a mind, because Ray loves things that are not falsifiable. Not only that, but this whole talk about the rose and how to create something out of nothing leads to larger arguments and questions that you could have about Ray's version of God, because what sort of being could do this, and further would want to create a whole world, including roses and Ray comfort and bananas and whatnot? These are all questions that would be very interesting, but of course Ray doesn't talk about these at all, or evidence for that God, because then he'd have to actually defend what he believes, and he doesn't like to do that. He likes to try and tear other people down.
If Ray's going to say, well, this is the God, and this God can create a universe, the problem with that even being a presuppositionalist point is that why would God create anything? Because if anything is created other than God, it becomes less perfect than it optimally could be. God is the most perfect thing, correct? In the eyes of a Christian, in the eyes, if you are a Christian or if you are an apologist, God is the most perfect thing.
Sure.
If God creates Earth, he automatically is downgrading the quality of the universe.
Yes.
So why is he doing that? Is God in the let's make shit worse business? Maybe.
You'd have to ask Ray.
Right? I have no idea.
I'd also like to point out that in this, Ray says, you can't make a seed out of nothing. I would also say nothing, as far as we know, makes anything out of nothing, and seeds already don't come from nothing. We've never seen a seed appear out of nothing from God. Seeds come from trees, which came from seeds, which came from trees, and if you dial that all the way back, I'm sure there was a much simpler organism that developed the ability to create seeds as a way of multiplying. But the fact is, seeds didn't come from nothing. Nothing came from nothing. He's literally getting evolution's claims and creationist claims reversed, as he's been doing this entire time. Evolution deals with existing life using what already exists to change over time. Creationism is creating something from nothing.
Yeah.
He flips. It's
And
like
he makes it sound like it's the craziest thing ever, but that's what he's arguing on behalf of. Ray has a graphic that comes up, and he brings up the fact that the FFRF, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and how they have helped to successfully keep intelligent design out of schools and universities, as if it's a bad thing. And if you want more information on that, you can see our review of Expelled with Ben Stein.
Yeah, that was pretty good. We talked a lot about evolution there, too, obviously. Interestingly, both of them bring up Nazis in relation to evolution.
How weird.
But anyway, if you want to see us talk about that more, check it out there. But, god damn it, Ray, you just had to bring up it in schools. Whatever. Yeah. Now comes the talk about vestigial organs.
Love it.
Ray gets this entirely wrong, and it's very interesting.
So Kent Hovind.
Yeah, he talks about the tailbone, the appendix, whale pelvises, all that jazz, and he says that they're not vestigial like scientists claim. The tailbone has tons of tendons and stuff connected to it.
Of course it does. It's in the body.
Guess what, Ray? Vestigial doesn't mean it has no use anymore. It means that its previous primary function is no longer needed, and therefore its reduced importance in the body. It doesn't mean that it's not doing anything. It doesn't mean it's just something floating in the middle of your body doing nothing. It means that it was evolved for some function that is no longer needed, and therefore it doesn't serve that function. It may still serve other functions now. And it's interesting that he then brings up the appendix as if it is not vestigial. He talks about how it may have a role in the immune system, which I've heard before, but generally speaking, as I've heard it, it was a past thing we used in the immune system. It is, you can cut it out of you, Ray. It is vestigial.
Yeah, a lot of people think, as we used to eat a lot of raw meat mostly, and that has a lot of bacteria, and it was kind of like a gut bug keeper.
Yeah. This is the worst part of the movie. It's only like half an hour, by the way. I guarantee our review is longer than the fucking movie.
Again.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of problems we got to go through, because the people in the movie don't get the time to fully rebut him, so that's why we do it.
He says to the people, can you name a few famous atheists? And at this point I said, what the fuck does this have to do with evolution? You know, I'm an atheist. I do this for my job, obviously. Sure. But I don't really give a shit who's a famous atheist.
I didn't know that we had to have of them. Although we do have several. I just didn't know that was a thing.
No, and there are people that I respect in the atheist community, and I like their arguments, but that doesn't mean I give a shit if they're famous or not.
I'm surprised no one said Richard Dawkins, though.
I know.
Not one did.
But anyway, then he brings up this shitty meme, because clearly memes on the fucking internet are the standard by which we should judge our beliefs.
You've all seen the meme. Here's the meme. It's like, if atheism was good enough for these douchebags, or whatever they say, why isn't it good enough for you? And of course,
you know, plenty of the people on there, most of them are not atheists. I think was Isaac Newton on there? Of course,
Isaac Newton was he was a very focused. Like, his faith led him to the discoveries that he had.
Some of them, oh yeah.
A lot of apologists use Newton in response to atheism is bad, because they're like, well, we wouldn't have had Isaac Newton. Well, yeah, but he was a high functioning autist.
He was into biblical numerology.
Yeah. And trying. And he was an alchemist.
Yeah. But anyway, some of the people on the poster, it's arguable, but at the end of the day, I don't really give a shit. It has nothing to do with what I believe. I don't not believe in God because these people...
Right. I don't understand, like, why would it matter if... Even Darwin, why does it matter?
No, I don't think it does.
Just because he lays the framework for evolution. Evolution's not the thing that tipped me over to atheism. Evolution's a thing I believed before I even considered where my cosmology was. It has nothing to do with whether you believe in God. You can fully be a very practicing and devout Christian and accept evolution as a scientific fact.
Yeah.
It doesn't make people not have faith. I mean, some people, sure, that's what tips them over the edge. We know a kid that had the Higgs boson was discovered, and he's like, I'm an atheist, and he's still an atheist to this day. Okay. And I hope he has better reasons now, because that's just what gives Adam's mass, man.
So after that shitty discussion that has nothing to do with evolution, he talks about moral relativism, which is always such a fun topic to talk about with presuppositionalists, because they're so reasonable when it comes to it. And he says, is rape wrong? He asks this to several people, and of course they say, yes, rape is wrong.
course.
But many of them say, according to me, because they're trying to make a point about moral relativism. And then he uses this as an example of how moral relativism is wrong, because he sees this as somehow saying that in some way rape is right. However, I would like to point out that the person who says that the Bible is the one true source of knowledge is saying that using rape as an example, whereas in the Bible, it says that things like being covetous or cursing your parents is objectively worse than rape.
Yeah, because rape is excusable in certain circumstances, whereas being covetous is not. Even things so petty as to not be as hospitable as you possibly can, that is a sin greater than rape in the Bible, and it's punished more severely and more quickly.
Yeah. And
Every time.
If you want quick evidence of any of this stuff, go ahead and check out the 10 Commandments and notice how rape isn't there, and then notice how if you are a rapist, you then have to marry the person you raped.
Right. You're not put to death, you're not stoned, you're just pretty much get what you wanted anyways.
Yeah. He then uses the thought experiment, which is really interesting, and I think it actually does the opposite of what he means it to do. He asks these people, okay, you have a pool, you have a dog that you love, and a neighbor that you hate.
Right.
The dog and the neighbor start drowning in your pool. Which one do you jump in to save?
A lot of people said the dog, and I think his argument was if evolution is true, you should favor your own species?
I guess, but not only that, I think it's interesting that he's trying to say that these people are wrong for picking that, whereas some people picked one and others picked the other.
Right.
Doesn't that prove that moral relativism is true? Because some people place moral value on pets that they love over a neighbor that they hate. I'm not saying which one's right or wrong. I think it's a thought experiment that's
Right.
meant to test your moral compass or whatever. But doesn't that tell you that different people think different things are moral?
But wouldn't most people save what they consider to be a family member over someone they don't love? Like,
Probably.
Even though it's a dog, it doesn't make it any less important to you.
No, it's
super weird.
Yeah. I have no idea where Ray's coming from on this one. I think that one, even as far if I was like on his side, I think that one would have made me gone, ooh, wait a minute, that's morally
That's just
relative,
that's
I
just
guess.
like a crappy argument. He
Yeah.
could have done that a lot more effectively.
And then he says, it's very brief, luckily, the Ben Stein documentary that we
Went
did.
on for like a half hour.
That went on a half hour about Hitler. Ray Comfort very briefly says, though, Hitler was just putting evolution into practice. It was survival of the fittest. Ray, survival of the fittest has nothing to do with, like, necessarily killing.
Right,
or
I
anything
understand,
like that.
and I understand how you could get an aggressive tone from survival of the fittest.
Fittest doesn't mean most violent or most good at killing, though.
It means
Fittest,
most fit to live in the environment that you're in and to compete for resources.
right, like a penguin at the South Pole. I think it's the South.
Penguin is more fit for that environment than a human is.
Even though we're real good at killing penguins.
We are so good at killing them. We can club them and eat them. But so survival of the fittest is so much more about in the habitat. If you have Group A and Group B, whichever one is more suited to that environment and the current factors therein, as including but not limited to competition for resources, the climate, and reproductive capabilities. Whichever one's fittest is just the one that gets to reproduce more.
I know.
Really.
I think it's interesting that people like Ray Comfort and Ben Stein try and place this moral obligation on evolution.
I have no idea.
And I think I've said this before, but the fact is, treating evolution as if it's moral and weighing evolution morally is like saying gravity is immoral because sometimes people die by falling off of buildings. It's just a fact of nature. We're not saying it's a moral system that you need to adhere to. It's just a fact of biology and how species work. It's how we've gotten to the point where we have so many species on this planet, and sometimes they go extinct and sometimes they thrive. It's just how it is. It has nothing to do with whether or not it's right. No, in happy-go-lucky, I'm fucking Ray Comfort land, if we could decide what is true, then yeah, every species, let's all join fucking hands and eat vegetables and be happy.
Dodo birds come back and they're like, hey, I'm a dodo bird. And they're like, you're kind of dumb.
But that's not how the world works. We're not describing how we wish the world to be, unlike you. We're describing how the world is as far as we can see based upon the evidence provided. Ray, of course, we're getting to the end of it now when he does his Are You a Good Person routine. We talked about it in the Audacity review. We're not going to cover it as much here, but he basically just asks people, are you a good person? Goes over the 10 Commandments, points out they're not good people according to the 10 Commandments.
And he claims atheists are only atheists because it gives them a free pass to be immoral and fly in the face of those commandments, which doesn't make sense. And also the guy he says this to pretty much laughs in his face, and he kept it, which was weird, because I think he thought it was a nervous laugh, but what it looked like was a defiant, okay, buddy, laugh.
The idea that atheists are atheists,
It's
so
that-
they don't have to obey commandments doesn't make any
time.
sense. It'd be like if I were to get in my car and say, I don't believe in the police, so I can go speed and kill people.
You're gonna get caught by
No.
the police still.
Because if I started out at the point of already thinking the police do exist, pretending they don't doesn't make the consequences go away. The same thing, if I actually believed God existed, pretending to not believe in him wouldn't make consequences go away. I don't think the Bible's true and don't necessarily adhere to the Ten Commandments,
Right.
though I don't kill people and stuff. I have my own set of morals.
Right.
I don't adhere to that because I don't think God exists.
We're really bad at the first 3 commandments.
Yeah.
But we're pretty good at most of the other ones.
Yeah, the
I
other
think.
ones I'm pretty good.
Yeah.
I've never coveted my neighbor's oxen. That's a fact. It's helped that my neighbor does not have oxen. However,
Maybe if they did, I'd get oxen jealousy.
maybe I've never
like fits of it.
I've never like seen an oxen in real life, I guess, so maybe I'd see it and be like, "Oh god,
Look at that oxen.
I want to bury my face in it."
Like a motorboat, but an oxen.
Yeah, probably smells disgusting,
Like
just
a
how I
rim
like
job,
it.
an oxen rim job.
Yep. That's what I'm talking about. So then it just about ends and Ray asks, "Could you be wrong to the evolution people?" And generally they say, "Yes, of course I could be wrong." And they're
that's-
correct, because I agree with that. Everyone could be wrong. I could be wrong about literally everything I've ever thought or believed. But the
Right.
fact is, we're imperfect. We
That's the
have
point.
flaws, but we can't just go around life like aimlessly, just like, I don't what are pants? I don't I don't know how to poop in toilets because I don't believe in them. Like we have to have some standard by which we evaluate the world around us
Yeah.
and decide what information is best suited to help us live that life. And that's what we do day to day, but that doesn't mean we're always right or always wrong. It just means we're doing our best, Ray. And the fact that these people are able to say, I could be wrong, and then they literally, right after that, they ask him the same question, and he says no,
Right.
tells you everything you need to know about who you should trust in that situation. Whether you are a creationist or someone who adheres to the ideas of evolution. The fact is, if you have 2 people and one of them says, sure, I'm basing my ideas on the evidence I have, but I could always be wrong, I'm always open to new evidence.
Sure.
And then on the other hand, you have someone who says, no, I'm absolutely right, nothing can make me wrong. You should pretty much always trust the person who's willing to accept new information.
Yeah.
Regardless of Ray Comfort's ideas other than that, and don't get me wrong, they are shit. Ray Comfort as a person is intellectually dishonest because he believes something and is unwilling to change it, even if he's presented with evidence that flies in the face of what he already believes.
And that's such a presuppositionalist position to take. It's so Sci-10 Bruggenkate, it's ridiculous. Basically, the argument he's making is, if you can be false, then everything you believe in can also be false, making you 100% false. All we're saying when we say, yeah, we could be false, is allowing the possibility of new information to change our minds.
Right.
And that's the point.
The amount of confidence you have in something does not necessarily correlate with how correct you are on something, Ray, and you are the greatest evidence of that I have ever seen.
And then he has the worst stinger in the history of debates. He'll say to the people, okay, spell shop. And several people are like, spell shop? And he's like, yeah, spell shop. And then they go, S-H-O-P. And then he goes, okay, what do you do when you stop at a green light? And he goes, stop. And he goes, green light. And they're like, you got me. What?
It's trying to illustrate that our perceptions can fool us. And you're correct, Ray, which is why these people have already said that they are willing to change their position in the face of evidence.
All that did was
You're
prove
the-
you're wrong.
I know. So I don't know, Ray. If you're so keen on saying that our perceptions can be wrong, and you are correct, how do you know that you're not wrong about the Bible and the fact that it's written by people who were there? How would you know? You weren't there when it was written. For all you know, it was written by a guy in his basement 2 days before you were born, and everyone's just lying to you. How would you know? Maybe you're a brain in a jar somewhere and hooked into a computer program, or we're all part of a turtle's dream in space.
Solipsism.
Anyway, so that's pretty much the movie. After that, Ray gives a little spiel about living waters. And then there's an ad for the Creation Museum, which is just beautiful. And Ray, you know what? Thanks to your little ad, it told us where the Creation Museum was. And for some reason, I guess I had always
I
thought...
thought it was a lot farther.
I thought it was a lot further from where we live.
It's about a 4-hour drive from us.
That's interesting.
So maybe we'll probably have to go and do that at some point.
So that's going to happen. We're going to go to the Creation Museum sometime in the future, and you can expect a fun video on that. But anyway, that's evolution versus God. It's fucking terrible. Ray Comfort doesn't know what he's talking about in regard to evolution.
He has really no leg to stand on. I've heard many better arguments against evolution, although none of them are compelling. At least they were sat in some sort of, I'm going to take a look at the facts and I disagree with them and here's why.
Sure.
He's just like, Bible right, evolution wrong. He's just slamming his head against a book.
That's probably the worst thing I can say about Ray Comfort, and it's also true. He's trying to rally against something which I don't think you can successfully fully rally against.
Right.
But there are things that are problematic within the study of evolution that he absolutely could take a stab at, but he doesn't. The fact that he could make better arguments, but doesn't because they're not as compelling to his audience, which are generally people who want to believe what he's saying anyway.
B-level apologists.
Yeah. He's making shittier arguments so they're easier to digest for his audience, and that's despicable.
The best argument you can make is, well, the evidence stops here. What makes you believe this is why this is a thing?
And that's fine.
And that's
completely
okay.
reasonable.
And obviously, for me, that's not enough for me to go, well, in 90% of the other times, it's very correct, and so I trust the method that they're using, and I will give them the benefit of the doubt until that's either proven wrong or proven correct.
Sure.
Like, because they always use this thing, like, science always contradicts itself. That's the point. That's what the scientific method is. You have to test and retest, and then when you gather new data, you change your hypothesis, and you change how you got there, and you make sure that you're correct as many times as possible until you know you're fucking correct. That's why gravity is a fact. Like, we know, obviously it acts on people, but we know how it works. We know the properties of it, and to a mathematical certainty, because we've tested and retested it so often. The same goes for evolution. Just because we can't know 100% of all the species that ever existed, because there's not evidence of all of them ever, what we can do is look at the genetic codes, we can look at the physical evidence, being fossils and stuff like that, and we can look at current trends in current living animals, and we can extrapolate all that together, and we can make a coherent narrative on what's happening throughout the biological scale.
Yeah. So thanks, everyone. I think that's the movie. Whatever movie you want us to do next, please tell us in the comments, because we're not going to do Ray Comfort's other movie 180 for probably a long time.
It's just an abortion thing. Maybe if an abortion comes up back up in the news, probably after the election cycle, I assume it'll be a big thing.
Sure.
Maybe we'll do it then, but it's not that interesting to me. It's basically just an abortion argument, which actually at least that has some sort of moral stakes in it, and it doesn't have to be. You can have a secular argument about that apart from the Bible,
but
and
don't
actually
worry,
make good points.
He ruins it. He
doesn't.
ruins it, so it doesn't matter. But seriously, thanks everyone. This is pretty much the last we're going to talk about the Ray Comfort thing, though, unless he takes this down.
If he takes this down, you can expect us to be in court with Ray Comfort.
You'll hear about it. We'd have to start a GoFundMe. And I wonder how many people would donate to a GoFundMe that's, hey, we're going to sue Ray Comfort.
Oh, probably a lot.
Yeah.
What we'd probably do is take most of the winnings and be like, all right, let's go into FFRF or some shit.
Sure.
Because,
that'd be great.
oh my God.
I'd love to give Ray Comfort's money to the Freedom from Religion Foundation. That'd be beautiful.
That'd be so great.
Anyway, so you can always check us out on Twitter at Bible Reloaded.
You can check out Hugo at Hugo Reloaded. You can always subscribe and get more of our movie reviews. We also do a Bible study, chick track, stuff like that.
You can always check out our Patreon. We do a once-a-month Patreon hangout. We just did our second one. It was pretty good. It lasted 2 hours, way longer than I thought it was going to.
It was about 45 minutes longer than the first one, I think.
Yeah, maybe the next one will be like 5 hours long.
5 hours of Jake and Hugo sweating in their apartment.
It's too much. It's too much. So other than that, thanks everyone. Until next time, I'm Hugo.
And I am Jake.
And this has been The Ray Comfort Show starring Hugo and Jake.
Evolution's fake.
Look at my mustache. It smells like bananas.
I name dropped Kirk Cameron.
Oh, Ray.